Life has a way of throwing you into situations you never see coming, and the fallout can be bigger than you ever imagined. That's exactly what happened to me. I got framed, fired, and accidentally set off a chain of events that tore apart a restaurant's management, exposed some serious corruption, got the FBI involved, and even led to deportations. This all started with me trying to do my job the right way, and ends with a story I'll never forget. For over 3 years, I worked at an upscale restaurant in Chicago, owned by a big corporate chain. I started as a server, but I was eager to learn everything I could. I picked up hosting, bartending, catering, deliveries, whatever they needed. Eventually, I became the go-to person for the carry-out, catering, and delivery department. I wasn't officially a manager, but I was running the show, and management even gave me a small raise to reflect the extra work. It wasn't much, but it helped me pay the bills, take care of my dog, and still enjoy some small pleasures like gaming. Things were steady until Harvey showed up. He was the new general manager, brought in to fix things. But when we Googled his name, the first result wasn't about his restaurant skills. It was a mugshot for domestic abuse. From the start, he made people uncomfortable. One of our best managers quit the moment he arrived, warning us about his behavior. Soon, Harvey replaced almost every manager with his own people, leaving just one from the old crew, Fredo, the kitchen manager. Fredo was a real chameleon, always changing to fit in with whoever was in charge. Under Harvey, he turned into a manipulative jerk. Our department didn't get a new manager, so I kept things running. Fredo, however, kept sticking his nose in where it didn't belong. He tried to cut hours, claiming we should be making tips like servers, even though most of our orders came through Grubhub, which doesn't tip. My team was barely scraping by as it was. Every time Fredo tried to mess with us, I'd push back, advocating for fair schedules and standing up for the team. Then came a meeting with Harvey and Fredo, where they promised to fix things. They said they'd stop cutting hours and always have at least 2 closers, which was crucial for handling the workload. My team even suggested I officially manage the department since I was already doing the job. That's when I saw it, the look between Harvey and Fredo. I didn't know how or when, but I knew my time there was about to end. Sure enough, within weeks, the promises were broken. Hours were slashed, closers were sent home early, and when I called Fredo out on it, he threatened my job. I backed off, but I knew they were setting me up. The setup came one day when I arrived an hour early for my shift, as I often did to grab a free bowl of soup for lunch. A line cook offered me an appetizer that he said had been canceled and comped by Fredo. It was my favorite dish, so I happily took it. But not long after, Harvey and Fredo confronted me, accusing me of stealing. Fredo pretended he didn't know what I was talking about, and Harvey fired me on the spot. I tried to explain, even offered to clear it up with the cook, but he'd already gone home. I had no choice but to leave. On my way out, I told my team what happened, and they were just as shocked and upset as I was. Before leaving, I stopped by the office to collect my tips. On a gut feeling, I started recording on my phone and slipped it into my pocket. That recording changed everything. While waiting for my tips, I caught Harvey and Fredo talking through the door, admitting they'd been planning to fire me since the meeting. They were laughing about how things had gone as planned. When they opened the door, I played it cool, shook their hands, and walked out with the proof in my pocket. At the time, I just wanted to clear my name for future job interviews. I had no idea that recording would blow the lid off a web of corruption and spark a chain of events that no one saw coming. After being fired, I left the restaurant determined to move on and find another job. On the train ride home, I posted in some local job seeker groups on Facebook, explaining that I'd been let go and was looking for work. By the time I got off at my stop, I already had an interview lined up for later that day. The interview went well, so well that they offered me the job within minutes. But the pay and conditions weren't quite what I was looking for, so I turned it down and kept searching. After a few more interviews, I found a position that was perfect for me. It was an auditing job at a logistics company, offering better pay and a stable work environment without the stress of dealing with customers. During the interview, the manager, let's call him Dean, mentioned that he'd already spoken with my former general manager, Harvey. Harvey had told him I was fired for theft. My heart sank. But then Dean asked me to explain my side of the story. I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording I'd made. Dean listened carefully to the muffled but clear conversation between Harvey and Fredo, where they admitted to setting me up. He recognized Harvey's voice, confirming it was the same person he'd spoken with. By the end of the video, Dean was convinced I was telling the truth. Not only did he hire me on the spot, but he also asked me to send him the recording. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just happy to land a new job and move forward. For the next 7 months, I settled into my new role and barely thought about the restaurant. Then, one day, an email from HR introduced a batch of new hires, complete with photos and fun facts. Scanning the list, I recognized one of the names, Thomas. He'd been a coworker at the restaurant, and we'd worked together at the host stand. I went over to his desk to catch up, curious about why he'd left the restaurant. Thomas looked surprised to see me and even more surprised when I asked about his departure.
"You don't know," he said.
"The whole place went to hell after you left." Apparently, not long after I was fired, someone had sent my recording to the corporate office. That someone, I later found out, was Dean's wife, a lawyer who forwarded the video to the company's legal team. The recording prompted corporate to launch an internal investigation. Thomas explained that when corporate sent an auditor to the restaurant, Harvey and Fredo panicked. They tried to bribe my old team with small pay raises to lie about me, hoping to spin a story about how I was incompetent and deserved to be fired. But the plan backfired. On the day the auditor arrived, let's call her Audrey, several team members quit on the spot, right in front of her. Before leaving, they spilled everything. The broken promises, the constant cuts to hours, and the toxic behavior of Harvey and Fredo. That was strike one for Harvey and Fredo. Strike two came when Audrey confronted them with the recording. Both denied it, but Harvey's voice was unmistakable. To make matters worse, the recording also included a snippet of our friendly farewell handshake, which they had bragged about to Audrey, thinking it would make them look professional. Instead, it confirmed the setup. Audrey decided to separate the two, temporarily demoting Harvey to a manager position and transferring Fredo to another restaurant. The separation didn't go well. The two had been thick as thieves, but under pressure, their partnership unraveled in spectacular fashion. Their feud spilled onto Facebook in a public post on the restaurant's page. Harvey left a passive-aggressive comment about Fredo not belonging in a company photo because he'd been moved for misconduct. Fredo fired back with a jab about Harvey's mugshot, saying, "At least when people Google my name, they don't see a guy who punched his wife." Harvey retaliated by accusing Fredo of cheating on his wife with another employee's sister. Fredo then accused Harvey of trying to hook up with half the waitstaff, claiming they all had stories about him being a creep. The post was deleted, but not before Audrey saw it. That was strike two. Strike three came during interviews with the female staff. Audrey learned that Harvey had been propositioning waitresses, offering to be their sugar daddy in exchange for nudes or after-hours favors. Every story followed the same pattern, and it was enough to get Harvey fired. But the fallout didn't stop there. Audrey wasn't just an auditor. She was the former regional manager and had personally hired Harvey's wife as a general manager at another location. After learning about Harvey's behavior, Audrey called Harvey's wife and told her everything. Their already strained marriage didn't survive the news. Harvey's wife filed for divorce, finally cutting ties with a man who had already been given a second chance after his history of domestic violence. Meanwhile, Fredo's situation got even worse. During an interview with Audrey, the line cook who had given me the canceled food let it slip that he was an undocumented immigrant. Audrey, holding his employment file, was confused. His paperwork showed a valid Illinois ID and social security number. Pressed for details, the line cook revealed that Fredo had been running a black market operation, providing fake documents to undocumented workers in exchange for a cut of their wages. Audrey had no choice but to report it. The FBI got involved, uncovering years of fraud. Fredo was arrested and, under pressure, gave up the names of workers he'd helped. 14 were identified, and at least half were deported, including the line cook who had unintentionally exposed Fredo's scheme. All of this started because of the recording I made the day I was fired, a recording I had no intention of sending to corporate. It had simply been a backup to clear my name if needed. Instead, it uncovered a web of corruption, deceit, and exploitation that brought down an entire management team and left the company reeling. What started as a fight to clear my name turned into something far bigger than I ever expected. After Frito's arrest, the FBI's investigation uncovered the extent of his illegal activities. For years, he had been running a black market operation, creating fake IDs and social security cards for undocumented workers. Frito wasn't just skimming a little off their wages. He had built an entire network. The FBI tracked his connections beyond the restaurant, linking him to other businesses and individuals involved in document forgery. The corporate chain owning the restaurant went into damage control mode. Having one of their managers arrested for felonies was bad enough, but the headlines about illegal hiring practices and deportations were a public relations nightmare. They launched a full internal audit of their hiring and payroll systems across all locations. More people lost their jobs, either for being directly involved in Frito's schemes or for looking the other way. At my old restaurant, the fallout was catastrophic. With Harvey gone, Frito arrested, and most of their team under scrutiny, corporate decided to overhaul the entire staff. Audrey led the effort, firing or relocating nearly every manager Harvey had brought in. The employees left behind were given the chance to transfer or accept severance packages. By the time the dust settled, the restaurant was practically unrecognizable. Meanwhile, I started hearing from former coworkers who had scattered to new jobs. Most of them were happy to be out of that toxic environment, though they were still bitter about how everything had played out. Some were angry at Frito for exploiting vulnerable workers. Others were furious at Harvey for creating such a hostile workplace. Everyone agreed the restaurant was better off without them. As for me, my life had taken a much different turn. The job I landed with Dean was a huge improvement over my old one. I had steady hours, better pay, and a supportive work environment. But the whole ordeal with the restaurant wasn't entirely behind me. One day, Dean pulled me aside to talk. He explained that his wife, the lawyer who had sent my recording to corporate, had been following the story closely. She was impressed by how I handled myself through everything, keeping my cool, documenting what happened, and standing up for what was right. She even offered to help me if I ever wanted to take legal action against the restaurant. I thought about it, but ultimately decided against it. The people responsible for what happened to me were already facing the consequences of their actions. Harvey had lost his job, his reputation, and his marriage. Frito was behind bars, his little empire in ruins. And the restaurant's corporate office had been forced to confront its own negligence. That felt like enough. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. My recording had sparked all of this, but I had never intended for it to get into corporate's hands. I asked Dean how it had ended up there, and he admitted that after watching the video, he'd shown it to his wife to get her opinion. She had sent it to the legal team at the corporate office, thinking it was the right thing to do. At first, I was a little annoyed. I hadn't given permission for the recording to be shared. But as I thought about everything that had come to light because of it, Harvey's harassment, Frito's crimes, the workers who finally got out of a toxic environment, I realized it was probably for the best. What started as a small act of self-preservation had exposed a system that was rotten to the core. When I look back on it now, I don't see myself as a hero. I wasn't out for revenge. I just wanted to protect myself and move on with my life. But sometimes, standing up for yourself is enough to create change, even if you never plan for it. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much came from that single recording I made on my way out the door. I was just trying to protect myself from being blacklisted by future employers. Instead, it led to a chain reaction that brought down corrupt managers, exposed illegal operations, and forced a massive corporation to clean house. Harvey lost everything: his job, his reputation, and his marriage. Frito ended up in prison, and his underground network of fake IDs unraveled, leading to arrests and deportations. Corporate had to overhaul their hiring practices and deal with the mess left behind. My former coworkers were able to move on, many finding better jobs and leaving that toxic environment for good. As for me, I landed on my feet. My new job gave me stability and respect, and the people I work with value integrity. Dean and his wife's role in everything reminded me that doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable, can have a ripple effect. I didn't start out trying to bring justice to a broken system. I just wanted to clear my name. But sometimes, the truth has a way of blowing everything wide open. The lesson here? Always protect yourself, especially in a workplace where things feel off. Document everything. Keep records. Speak up for yourself when something's wrong. You never know what kind of impact it might have, not just for you, but for the people around you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more. Your support helps me share stories like this and much more. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride.